Now, we were just talking about the Chancellor's upcoming statement with the Shadow Chancellor, and we know, of course, that the coronavirus lockdown has had a huge impact across the economy. But some sectors have been harder hit than others, and the futures of some businesses are looking particularly bleak. Now, this week, I got on the road and travelled to Birmingham to take a look at the economic fallout from COVID-19. The Hippodrome Theatre in Birmingham. Coronavirus has forced it to shut its doors for the first time in 125 years. The Book of Mormon set that's still on stage, an eerie reminder of the suddenness of the pandemic. And as nobody knows when theatres will be able to fill their seats again, it's an industry in crisis. This week, Southampton's Nuffield Theatre closed its doors for good. Others could follow.
We're in contact with our department, DCMS, and we know that they're working on guidance for how the sector can reopen. The problem that they have is we don't know when it will be safe to reopen and to allow people back into a theatre. And so that does make it really difficult for us to plan. I think if they knew, they'd tell us, but nobody from a health perspective knows how this pandemic is going to play out, whether there'll be second waves, whether some cities might need to close again like Leicester has. So I don't think they can in good faith give us a date right now, which does mean it's impossible for us to plan. And in a sector where 70% of theatres think they're going to be out of business and insolvent by Christmas, for us we're really at a crunch time where we need to know whether we're going to be running a Christmas season or not. And if it's not, we need to know whether there's going to be any sort of government support package that can help us through that period and stop us from insolvency. Like many theatres, and every day you're reading of another, we have put 50% of our permanent team at risk of redundancy, and we're working through that consultation program right at the moment.
That must be pretty heartbreaking.
It's devastating, and we are losing... It's heartbreaking because we're losing such good, talented people. People have made a massive contribution to this sector and have a huge amount more to give. And because this isn't just us, this is across the country, these people, it's going to be very hard for them to get jobs again in theatre. We're going to lose them from the sector, and we're going to lose all the skills and training that they've had. And that really is very hard to cope with. I think part of the reason that you're seeing theatres now go into massive redundancy programs is because the job retention scheme in its current form isn't going to be fit for purpose for us anymore. When we have zero income coming in, and we have no idea when we're going to be able to reopen our doors, the idea that we can start paying an employer contribution from August through to the end of October just doesn't work for our sector. We can't be paying more money towards staff because we can't be bringing them back to work and we're not trading.
And how many staff do you think you'll be forced to lose?
I would say at least 60. This sector employs 300,000 people across the country, and 70% of those jobs are likely to be at risk.
Talking to you before the interview, you were talking a bit about gallows humour, but this must be a pretty dark time as well.
It's very dark time, actually. It is. Yes, I think before the interview, you caught my comms manager, head of comms, and I having a laugh in the corner, and it's because it's such a dark time. Sometimes the only way that you can cope with it is a sort of gallows humour. But it's actually not funny. It's really not funny. I mean, we're staring right down the barrel at the moment of having no theatre left in this country. And I think people might wake up next April and say, oh, I really fancy going to a musical, and there won't be any anymore, and there won't be theatres anymore. And if we let this go now, it's going to take decades to rebuild to where it was. So what we're really pleading for at the moment is date guidance, so we have some idea of when we might be able to reopen so that we're able to plan, and also for a support package, because theatre and performing arts, it's not just for lovies. It's has a massive social and civic benefit, but it's an economic driver of the nighttime economy. It brings so much more to the landscape of towns and cities than just putting on shows.
What really struck me today is just how many jobs are reliant on the theatre. This area of Birmingham is full of shops, cafes, restaurants, pubs that feel they can't reopen until the Hippodrome does. It's like a mini economic ecosystem, and right now it's endangered. As the economic impact of coronavirus begins to be felt, research from the Resolution Foundation shows that the low-paid and the young are most likely to be at risk of losing their jobs.
If we look at what businesses say today, half of them are saying that they will lay off some of the workers that they have furloughed. That roughly equates to maybe 1 million workers losing their jobs as the job retention scheme, as the furlough scheme is phased out. That's a lot of people. That would take us to the highest unemployment we've seen at least since the early 1990s, 3 million people or 10% of the workforce unemployed. So this is a very serious situation.
And I guess quite different from previous recessions where more recently we've seen wages going down rather than people actually losing their jobs.
Yeah, one of the dangers is that when the financial crisis hit, it was a very deep recession, but the level of unemployment that we feared or worried about never actually turned up. It was really bad, but we didn't see a return to the 1980s levels of unemployment. And that may have bred some complacency because the conditions are just very different this time. So there are good reasons for thinking this could be a worse employment recession than we saw in the financial crisis.
And what specifically is it that you're calling for?
Well, I think later this week the Chancellor should announce not the VAT cut that some people have been calling for, but instead vouchers going direct to households to get them to spend in retail and in hospitality in the physical stores, not online. That is how we make sure that we have a recovery that is going at decent strength and targets that consumption, that spending, at the places that are being hit really hard. So this Wednesday we should see consumption vouchers being sent to every household, being announced that they'll be sent to every household. And we should also have a plan for jobs. We're calling for £17 billion worth spending to make sure that we subsidise jobs in those hardest hit sectors, but also create new jobs in the likes of social care and in retrofitting homes for energy efficiency.
There have been some encouraging signs that as lockdown has eased, the economic recovery has already started. But how optimistic should we be?
Well, I think there's a lot of evidence from periods in recent British history over the last 30, 40 years that when unemployment rises significantly, and it does disproportionately tend to fall on young people who either can't get a job when they leave school or university, or they've only just got a job and they're kind of last in, first out. There's a lot of evidence that there's a kind of scarring effect, that it affects their employment into the future and the wages and the incomes that they're going to earn, and that lasts many years rather than just a few months. So I think, unfortunately, in the absence of a very sharp recovery so that we're back to normal by, say, November, December, which I'm afraid I don't think is that likely, in the absence of that, I think we will have some long-term effects on many young people.
What is clear is that the economic consequences of coronavirus will not hit all people and all industries equally. Even if the bounce back happens, it may be too late for many businesses.